What we did here was take the intercoolers off of a 6BTA 370 horsepower marine engine. Did a lot of work on it to make it perfect. We found that after taking it off, not only did the condensation cause a lot of pitting on some of the surfaces, but we also found some pitting on the intercooler core itself on the brass flange. So I'll explain what we did on the intercooler itself and what I did on the core, and then I'll show you how it goes back together really easy. The very first thing I did, of course, was to take the intercooler core and completely clean it. That just meant boiling it for an hour in something like simple green or some other solution. And then of course I took a rod and cleaned out all the copper tubes that go through the intercooler to free up sludge or deposits or calcification that has occurred. What I found was that the intercooler brass flange, the sealing flanges on both ends, were pitted slightly. Not much, but just enough so it wouldn't be perfect. So what I did was I took it to the machine shop, and the machine shop just took off about 15 thousandths of an inch off of both ends to make it perfectly smooth. And it will cause a problem with the O-rings. Normally, the O-rings that you get with this is this particular O-ring. You can buy O-ring kits for $30, but I wouldn't recommend spending that kind of money. The standard O-ring for this is 5 inches in diameter, 5 3/8 OD, and 3/16 width, and this is that O-ring, and it's about $1.50 to $2 a piece. And you can see that by the fact that I machined this down, the O-ring doesn't snug up on the flange anymore. So what I did was I went to the next size down O-ring with a larger diameter. And this is a 4 7/8 inch O-ring with a 5 3/8 OD and a 1/4 inch width. So this is going to be the O-ring that I'll be using, which will be the same outside diameter as the original, but a little bit snugger and a little bit thicker. Next thing that needed to be cleaned up were the end caps, and what I did on this simply was to wire brushed it and use sandpaper to get the sealing surface here very smooth. It had just a tiny bit of pitting. I started with 220 grit sandpaper and ended up with 400, and have a perfectly smooth surface where the O-ring will be sitting. I did this on both end caps, and for demonstration purposes I have this one sealed up with a 3/8 inch pipe, plastic pipe plug, and the other one I have a 3/8 inch garden hose adapter. This will be important when I get to the point of actually pressure testing that after assembly. The housing was the biggest problem. Number one, it had some corrosion. Specifically, if you look at the housing, this is the top of the housing and this is the bottom of the housing. So what we did was we found that this surface here had pitting, and the surface inside here had some pitting. And so I had to actually have this surface here machined at the machine shop, and they took it down 35 thousandths of an inch to make it smooth. I also went in here with sandpaper and took all the pitting completely out. Now what this did was left the surfaces here exposed aluminum. This was originally black anodized to keep corrosion to a minimum. I used this product, which is aluminum black, for people who are into restoring guns. So essentially now the whole thing looks like it's black anodized and there's no exposed bare aluminum surface. The second thing I did was, of course, I completely sanded the outside and repainted it. The only difference between this and the one you may have is that this has been machined slightly here, so it's slightly smaller. And what happens is that This intercooler core, when it goes through here, is now going to be slightly taller, and so you just have to make sure that the end caps will fit properly and not allowing the end caps to go all the way down to the surface. Alright, we're going to start the assembly. Keep in mind that the intercooler core goes in a particular direction as an orientation. So when you put it in, it makes a difference whether it's this way or this way. You have to make sure that the orientation is proper. It goes in this way, and the orientation you can see is in this direction. So to prevent any metal-to-metal contact and any kind of corrosion resulting from that, we're going to put lots of lube on here. And the type of lube I use is that alcohol metal lube. There can't be any instances where you put too much. A cooler core to the other side, and I'll turn this completely around and lube this side up. So now that we have the intercooler, the intercooler core, both ends completely lubed and perfectly centered, so that the amount of the intercooler sticking out on this side is exactly the same as the amount sticking out on the other side. We are going to put the O-rings on and lube those up, and then we'll be ready to assemble the end cap. Lube the O-ring a little bit and place it on there. Everything is lubed up. Both ends are lubed up completely. You can see that there's no gaps. I use plenty of lubrication, making sure that the two pieces are perfectly centered. The amount that comes out on this side is equal to the amount that comes out on the other side. Double check that your orientation on the intercooler is in this direction. So you can see that these are perfectly lined up. The orientation of the end caps is always going away from the air intakes. So the first one will go on this way. And you can see what I did on the end caps. I lubed it generously, and I also lubed the threads on the bolts. So I'm just going to quickly hand tighten these. Both ends the same, they're just hand tight, keeping the core itself totally centered. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just do a little tightening of each bolt, and you can see if we get a little grease squishing out, that would be good. Alright, now we're going to tighten up the bolts on the other side. And that's pretty much the end of that. We're ready to do the pressure test on this, and I made 2 PVC end cap seals that will prevent the water from flowing out. PVC 1.5 inch pipe end cap, and PVC coupler going on to a 1.5 inch hose. We have a pipe, 3/8 inch pipe plug sealing the place where you would normally put your anode, your zinc anode. On this side we got the same thing, except I have my water inlet as opposed to a pipe plug. So this is where I will be connecting the hose. You should get no water inside the housing where the airflow occurs between these two ports. All the water should be contained within the intercooler core itself, between the end caps. And you keep it on for a while, you double check it, make sure that there's no water inside, and then you can be sure that it will work properly.